Good evening. Welcome to the fall lecture of the Jesse Helms Center. Before we begin, I would like to thank Karen Helms and each of the talented vocalists and musicians who joined her tonight for their wonderful presentation. It definitely paid to be here early. Let's hear a hand for them. Our invocation this evening will be led by the Reverend Karen Woods. Earlier this evening, Reverend Woods was named the Jesse Helms Center Citizen of the Year for her service to the community. Please rise and remain standing throughout that and the salute to the flag.
Let us pray. Father, we're indeed thankful for the privilege and the opportunity to stand before you this evening. We're privileged, Father, to be a part of such a wonderful country and live in such a wonderful state. We're privileged because we belong to you. We thank you this evening for allowing us to gather together in your name. We thank you for our guest speaker tonight, Lord. And we just ask that whatever he has to say, that we would have ears to hear and eyes to see. For this we give you all the praise and all the honor and all the glory. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
The work of the Jesse Helms Center includes several programs for young people. Tonight we've asked Tyler Clausen to represent those young people by leading us in our pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a beautiful fall evening, it's my joy to welcome you to Wingate University. I certainly hope that your travel plans today allowed you to arrive at Wingate early enough to see the beauty of our campus. If not, we welcome you back anytime, and we take it as a personal privilege to be able to show you around our campus and introduce you to our people. Just when you think you can't possibly come up with fresh remarks about a legend, history and current events often step in to help. Tonight it's my privilege to welcome the man who in just the last few months has made the cover of the Weekly Standard as the fifth face carved onto Mount Rushmore. Who has received such good reviews for his leadership in foreign relations from former critics that our own Charlotte Observer has been accused of going soft on him. Someone who has been honored by his friends and colleagues for his quarter century of service to our state and our nation. Who has recently added more than a score of new political cartoons, many with a distinctive Mexican flavor, to his personal collection by standing firmly for what he believed was best for this country. And who just this past week, once again, stood boldly for American principles of freedom and justice for all people by calling attention to Chinese abuses of human rights so that the visiting leader of that government could not possibly interpret our hospitality as approval of his cruel policies. Senator Helms, thank you for yet again doing what was right. And thank you for all that you have done to confound your detractors and confirm the support of your legions of friends. You represent your home folks and your alma mater with uncommon character and civility. Welcome home.
Thank you very much. You are great. Boy, it's great to be home. Thank you, Mr. President, for your gracious comments. I'm so proud and so greatly do I admire Jerry McGee, who, by the way, Congressman, is one of the truly great and versatile university presidents in America. In fact, you, Congressman, and Jerry McGee have a lot in common. You see, when Friday rolls around in the fall of the year, you'll find Wingate University's distinguished president, Jerry McGee, on his way to referee yet another Big East NCAA football game. Jerry's been refereeing college football games, I think, for about 20 years. And like our distinguished speaker of this evening, he is a devoted football enthusiast. In fact, Dr. McGee referred rather the word is refereed the Rose Bowl game last year. And just 2 days ago, he was in Syracuse refereeing the Syracuse, West Virginia game. And by the way, Congressman Watts, did you know that the only time in history that the Rose Bowl game was not played in Pasadena, it was played in Durham, North Carolina, in January of 1942. Oh, I remember it well. Now, our state is known all around the world, to be honest about it, for our top-flight basketball, but not so many people are yet fully aware of our state's distinguished college football history. And let's correct that just a little bit this evening. Now then, for the honor that is mine, about 3 years ago, I was set up. It was sort of the opposite of the Christians being fed to the lions. In my case, the Christian Coalition, to be precise, set me up. The occasion was the coalition's fall meeting in Washington, and Ralph Reed just insisted that I come. Now, I like Ralph Reed. He is a distinguished and articulate young American who understands his principles and he practices them. And that's about all I'm going to give him because of what I'm about to tell you. He insisted that I come and address a crowd of just about 2,000 people. You remember it well, too. Anyhow, I arrived about 5 minutes prior to the time I was due there, and they took me into a holding room, and I heard the concluding 5 minutes of the speaker preceding me, and I got a jolt. I could not see the speaker, but I heard his rich, almost booming voice talking about morality and personal responsibility and faith in God, and I assumed that this gent surely must be a great preacher somewhere. But as Congressman J.C. Watts finished that eloquent speech, the applause began, and it went on and on and on. And I said to myself, my Lord, I've got to follow this guy. Well, that was not unusual. It happened at least one other time. I had the same sinking feeling that I had in 1976 when I was scheduled to follow a 1976 presidential candidate. The thunderous applause for the then relatively unknown governor of California, his name was Ronald Reagan, left me with no option, and there I was to follow him. So I went to the podium, and I explained that prior to the meeting, I had made a deal with Governor Ronald Reagan. We had agreed to swap speeches. He was to deliver mine, and I was to deliver his. And then I told him I somehow lost his speech. It didn't really happen, but I felt like it did. Anyway, I'll not recite our distinguished visitor's impressive resume, which is in the printed program, which I suppose you have in your possession at this moment. But I do think it's important to mention a few highlights from the impressive career of this remarkable young congressman. His football prowess is well known. By the way, he met with a room full of Wingate University athletes this afternoon, and he wowed them. He left them so that they didn't have any question. They just wanted to stand there, as it happens, and applaud and applaud and applaud. This former quarterback, star quarterback, who led the University of Oklahoma to two consecutive Orange Bowl victories, from whence he was named the 1980 and 1981 most valuable player in the Orange Bowl. Now, he went on to play professional football in the Canadian Football League, where he maintained his high standards for excellence. And by the way, J.C. Watts often ran the old wishbone offense, which in the eyes of this former sports writer long ago is still, in my judgment, the best way to move the football. But that's another matter. Let me tell you a story about this outstanding American, my friend J.C. Watts. He means what he says, and he says what he means. He is an ordained Baptist minister who is never afraid to stand up for those moral and spiritual principles which absolutely must survive, my friends, if America is to survive. And it didn't take J.C. Watts long to prove his legislative mettle. He is taking a unique and innovative approach toward finding a solution to the pervasive problems of America's inner cities. Now, from where I sit in Washington, it seems to me that too many Washington politicians believe that the only way to address problems of poverty and unemployment is simply to pour more of the taxpayers' money into a failed federal welfare system that has long since proved that it does not work and will never work. Now, J.C. Watts believes, indeed he is living proof of, the fact that the American dream is available to all Americans who are willing to work hard and persevere even in the most difficult circumstances. Congressman Watts' thoughtful legislation, the Community Renewal Act, does far more for America's inner cities than 35 years of the so-called war on poverty, which was fought with water pistols. I can encourage each of you to get a copy of this bill, and if you want one, either write to him or to me, and one will be sent to you promptly. But let me get to the most important thing about J.C. Watts. He is a dedicated Christian who loves his God and his family. He is, as Oliver North often puts it about the North family, he is the husband of one and the father of 5. His oldest daughter is in the Air Force, and his youngest son, who at age 6 has expressed an interest in succeeding his father in Congress, and that time will come around pretty quick. All of which, to be honest about it, is why I am so proud and honored to have J.C. Watts come here to my home county and to my alma mater as the latest great Americans to participate in the Helms Center's series of guest speakers at Wingate University. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in for a treat. And without further delay, I am honored to present, as they say in the House of Representatives, the gentleman from Oklahoma, the Honorable J.C. Watts. J.C.
Thank you very much. The great American.
You're a great American.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Thank you so much. Thank you. Y'all stood up. I thought you were leaving. What an honor it is for me to be with Senator Helms today and to be here at Wingate University and to be with Dr. McGee, and I'm just delighted that Senator Helms would think enough of me to extend an invitation for me to be with you this evening, to be on this campus, his alma mater in his home county. I am just thrilled that I can be with you this afternoon, this evening. You know, Senator Helms called me probably about a month and a half ago, and he said, "Congressman, do you believe in free speech?" I said, "You better do." He said, "Would you come and give us one on November 3rd?" So here I am. It's interesting. I have been in Washington now for almost 3 years. And Senator Helm and I, we were talking about this on the way over here about how, I've often thought you should measure legislative terms in dog years. For every 1 year, it feels like you've served 7. And we were talking about not getting elected. He said, I keep winning these elections, and he said, I look forward to kind of staying home with Dot, and I keep winning. And I have felt like that a time or two in the last 3 years. I have been in Washington for 3 years, and I have often said to my wife, if God gave me but 3 years to live, I'd say, Lord, allow me to live them as a congressman because they've been the longest 3 years of my life. But they've been a good 3 years, and I am delighted that God in his infinite wisdom would allow J.C. Watts Jr. to serve in the United States House of Representatives and walk the halls that great men like Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass and Thomas Jefferson. Those men have walked those halls, and those are hallowed floors that I walk on a daily basis, and I'm honored to be serving the 4th District of Oklahoma, my state, and my nation in the United States House of Representatives. Senator, it's always interesting to know what your children think about your work. And as the senator mentioned, I've got 5 wonderful, healthy, vibrant children. And it's always interesting to know what they think about your work. Trey, my 6-year-old here a couple of years ago, was given the award at church for being the Cubby of the Year in a program that we have at church called Awanas. And Trey went through 3 entire Awana books, and most of his peers only had gotten through 1. And so Trey was given the award for being the Cubby of the Year for memorizing the most scripture. And the more scripture you memorize, the more Awana bucks you get. The more Awana bucks you get, obviously, the more Awana bucks you can spend at the Awana store. And so my wife, who helps Trey memorize these scriptures, she said, Trey, she said, let me tell you, you are so good. She said, Trey, you are so good at memorizing scripture. She said, Trey, when you grow up, you're going to be a genius. And Trey said, when I grow up, I don't want to be a genius. I want to be a congressman like my dad. So my wife called me and shared that with me, and I said, Frankie, I don't know if I should take that as a backhand slap or a compliment. But anyway, I am delighted to be with you. I created about 4 pages worth of notes here, but I'm not going to use them. I'm not very good at using notes. I think that we're at a time in our nation's history, friends, that we need to speak to the American people from the heart. I think we live in the most wonderful nation known to man. And I believe that we live in a great nation. And as I have often said, if you think that we don't live in a great nation, you consider the fact that you hardly ever hear of people killing themselves to get out of America, but you often hear of people killing themselves to get in. In spite of all of our faults and all of our failures and our shortcomings, we are the very best. We are the greatest nation known to man. And I think if we are to sustain the greatness of the most wonderful nation known to man, as we get ready to take on the new millennium, the 21st century, I believe there's things that we must do. There's things that we must do. We must bring our financial house in order. We've been talking about that now for the last 30 years. And friends, you know, it's interesting. My father, who spent 2 days in the 7th grade, that's the extent of his education. But he is a great man of wisdom and probably one of the smartest people that I've ever been around in all my life. And I saw my father accomplish everything that he ever accomplished, and he accomplished much with his 6th grade education by using 3 things: hard work, common sense, and his faith. I went home one day, 45 days from graduating from the University of Oklahoma. I'd gone home, and Daddy and I would often sat in the front room of his house. They're in little old Eufaula, Oklahoma, population about 3,500 today, about 2,000 people when I graduated back in 1976. And Daddy and I would sat in the front room of his house, and Karen, we would often solve many of America's problems according to the Book of Watts. And this particular evening, we had sat up until about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was time to retire, and Daddy said something to me that I'll never forget if I live to be 150 years old. He said this. He said, "Junior," he said, "you know, I think I want to go to college." I said, "Daddy, go to college?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You're 57 years old, you're a double bypass heart patient, Mom is diabetic, you know, you've got these cows, you've got these rental properties, you're pastoring a church. Why in the world do you want to go to college?" True story. He said, "I'd like to see what makes you guys fools after you get out." True story. True story. He said, "You guys failed to use common sense." He said, I don't understand it. Friends, the problems facing America today, we would be well served if we'd use just a little old Buddy Watts common sense. You know, common sense should say to us, if the average American family is paying 45 to 52 cents of every dollar they make in some government tax or government fee, we should cut taxes. That's not difficult to figure out, that we should cut taxes. Common sense should say to us that if we've got a $6 trillion national debt that once we zero out in the year 2002, we zero out the deficit, we would not have paid one dime on a $6 trillion national debt. Think about what we could do with the $300 billion per year that we pay on the interest alone on a national debt. $300 billion go to pay the interest alone on the national debt. We do not spend one dime of that $300 billion in education. We do not spend one dime of that $300 billion in military. We do not spend one dime of that $300 billion in fixing roads. We do not spend one dime of that $300 billion feeding America's citizens. Not one dime. $300 billion is what we paid on the interest alone in fiscal 1997. Common sense should tell us this. Common sense should tell us if we've got people on welfare struggling to make it, and they want to get off welfare and they want to open the gateway to the future for themselves and for their kids. Common sense should say to us we should not sustain a system that says that once that mother comes off welfare, she takes a job, she works 30 days, she finds out that she brings home less money by working and being productive than she does by being on welfare. Because they tax her income, they take away her benefits. And this mother says, "Hey, in this land of opportunity, I don't think I want that opportunity." Why not say this? Why not do this? I say, let's eliminate the taxes on the first several rungs of the ladder so the reward for working is greater than the reward for not working. You know, why is it that in America the only way you can get ahead is two ways to do it? You can save or you can invest. Why do we penalize welfare moms for saving money? 1.5 million inmates in the United States of America, 95% of them will say to you, we had no father influence, no male influence in our home in growing up, and yet we penalize the welfare mom for marrying the father of her children. Why is that? Why is that? Common sense should say to us, we can't sustain that type of system. We should not sustain that type of system. I continue to be baffled it's interesting. I have heard so much over the last 6 months about the tobacco battle, about we shouldn't encourage young people to smoke cigarettes. And friends, I agree with that. We shouldn't encourage the youth of America to smoke cigarettes. But I find it interesting that we would attack the tobacco industry and say that Julia Roberts and Will Smith should not glorify smoking to teenagers in their movies. But it's interesting to me that we never say anything about Ellen kissing her lover. We never say anything. Friends, as we find ourselves going into the 21st century, starting the new millennium, we must understand this. We must understand America is a great nation, but America is not great enough that she can shake her fist in the face of a holy God and expect to get away with it. It won't work. Common sense, you know, all my life, my father and my mother and my grandmother would say to me things that would encourage me and nourish me and tweak me whenever they felt like I needed to be tweaked and turned and pulled and jerked on, to say, if you keep making dumb decisions like that, you will not accomplish the things that you want to accomplish in life. Daddy would always come up with these one-liners like, you've got to take the bitter with the sweet. Friends, life is not going to be a bed of roses. We're going to have difficulties. We're going to have challenges. We're going to have adverse moments in our lives. We're going to have difficult circumstances in our lives. But we've got to take the bitter with the sweet. He would always say that. He would always say, the one I used to love to hear him tell me, the one I used to hear him articulate is this: the only helping hand you can ever really rely on other than your faith in a true and living God is the one at the end of your sleeve. Pretty good advice. Pretty good advice. Economically, he would always talk to his kids about money and about saving money and about spending money and about managing money. And he'd always say, Junior, you should manage your money. You should manage other people's money the way you manage your own money. You manage your money the way, manage other people's money with the same safety and the same security and the same intelligence that you manage your own money. And he'd say, remember, son, he said, you can't spend out more money than you take in. Again, this is common sense. You can't spend out more money than you take in. That's what we've been saying in Washington for the last 3 years. You can't spend out more money than you take in. If you make $500 a month, you can't spend $750 a month. And he had this little poem, this little rhyme that he would say, when he'd say, if your outgo exceeds your income, your uplift will come to a downfall. He said that for years. You can't do it. You can't do it. That's why I supported a balanced budget amendment. That wasn't Republican or Democrat to me. That was Buddy Watts saying you can't spend out more money than you take in. If Washington takes in $1.8 trillion on an annual basis, we can't spend $2 trillion. We can do it, but you know what happens? We put a massive burden on my 6-year-old son, Trey. We put a horrible economic responsibility on your kids and your grandkids. Friends, I think we need to stop and take a look at what we're doing. We need to allow in Washington and in state governments all over the nation, we need to allow new ideas to compete with old ideas. I say we've done it a certain way for the last 30 years. Let's do it a different way. Let's try something different. Common sense would say to you, why do we trap poor inner city kids into failing schools? I've often wondered that. You know, Washington, D.C., less than 3 blocks away from the place that I vote every day to spend billions of dollars, less than 3 blocks away from there, you have kids that go to school every morning. They walk through metal detectors. Friends carry guns and knives. You think those kids are going to an environment that they're going to learn? No. Those kids are going into a school system that will fail them every day of their lives for the rest of their lives. And friends, I've introduced some legislation called Helps scholarships that we're going to be voting on tomorrow. And I'm sad to say that it's probably going to fail. It's probably going to fail. And those poor inner city kids are going to have to continue going to schools that will fail them every day of their lives. And there is a debate in Washington that would say, well, JC, you're taking money from public education. You're going to ruin public education. Friends, let me tell you something. That is an indictment on public education in itself. If you think that giving parents a choice and they're going to choose the private school or the private faith-based school, you're indicting public education yourself. I am not anti-public education. I am a product of public education. My children are in public education and in public schools. No good school should be threatened by the legislation by Helps scholarships. No good school should be threatened by that. But schools that put out bad product, they should be threatened by that. And friends, if our kids cannot read and write and do the arithmetic and understand the computer skills, they will not be able to compete in this global marketplace. And you know who's being failed by these bad systems, some of these bad systems? You know who's losing out? Poor kids. Poor kids. Not my kids. I am young enough, I am energetic enough, I've got enough salesmen in me that I can go out and I can work 2 or 3 jobs if I want to put my kids in private school and make sure that they get the best possible education that they possibly can. But you have poor parents in inner cities. They cannot do that. They don't have the resources that I have. And because they can't afford it, they have to send their kids to schools that don't work. That don't work. And it is wrong. And we use the debate, we use the rebuttal that says, well, you're taking money from public education. The Help scholarships that I've offered, the funding is over and above public education funding. And let me tell you something, friends. My program doesn't take money from public education. You know who's taking money from the public education system? The prison system. Because we're spending $20,000 to $30,000 a year to lock up inmates that can't read and write and do the arithmetic, and that's where our money for public education is going. Common sense. And friends, we've got to be careful that we're not encouraging this cycle of poverty. We've got to take a look at over the last 25, 30 years at how we've created poverty. And friends, consider this. 4 things that we cannot do until the 21st century if we want to defeat poverty. We've had a war on poverty. We've declared war on poverty for the last 25, 30 years, and poverty has won. Poor people are more poor today in 1997 than they were in 1967. Poverty has won. And friends, we will continue to create poverty, and we will continue to encourage poverty if we do these 4 things that I'm about to mention. You will continue to create poverty if you allow the rewards for welfare and unemployment to be greater than the reward for working and being productive. That's not Republican or Democrat. It's not red, yellow, brown, black, or white. It's not liberal or conservative. That is a fact. 2, you will create poverty If you allow the reward for the families that break up to be greater than the reward for the families that stay together, you will create poverty. That's not Republican or Democrat. It's not liberal or conservative. It is not red, yellow, brown, black, or white. That is a fact. Number 3, you will create poverty. You will create poverty and continue to create poverty if you allow the reward for the drug dealer on the streets to be greater than the reward for the person that'll take a second mortgage in their home, say, I've got $5,000, I've got a product or service, I'm going to take it to the marketplace, and I'm going to build me a business. You allow the reward for the drug dealer on the streets to be greater than the reward for the risk taker, you will create poverty. And friends, we don't need more taxes, we need more taxpayers. How do you get more taxpayers? You encourage risk taking, you encourage investment. You'll get more jobs. And the last thing is this: if you really want to deepen and broaden and expand poverty, do this. You weaken the link between effort and reward. You will create a poverty so deep that this nation will look like a third world nation in 12 to 15 years. That's not Republican or Democrat. It's not liberal or conservative. It's not red, yellow, brown, black, or white. That is a fact. Friends, we need a new war on poverty using the tools of home ownership, private property, free enterprise. If I were to ask anybody in this room to give me a speech outline to go over to Russia and say to Russia, talk to Russia and Czechoslovakia and all these, third world nations, tell me, give me a speech outline to go over here and tell them, encourage them, educate them on how to grow their economy. Republican or Democrat, you know what you'd say? You'd say, tell them to create private property, home ownership. Tell them to encourage the free enterprise system. Tell them to encourage capitalism. Tell them to decentralize government. Friends, I ask you, if it's good enough for Russia, if it's good enough for Czechoslovakia, why isn't it good enough for America? We cannot... We must declare war on poverty using the tools of free enterprise and capitalism and private property. And we must go into the poor communities in every pocket of poverty in America using these tools. Every pocket of poverty in North Carolina, every pocket of poverty in Oklahoma, every pocket of poverty in every state in the nation, and declare a war on poverty using those tools. Friends, we've got caged eagles in the poor communities just waiting to soar if we give them a chance. I never understood why is it that we've allowed a government to redline a community. When you redline a community, what you are saying let's allow that community to die on the vine, dry up and die on the vine. So thus, I created the American Community Renewal Act to say, let's go into these poor communities and let's create home ownership. And you know why I want to create home ownership? Because I found in the last 10 years, when people feel like they have a stake in the system, which is their home for 95% of the American people, when people feel like they have a stake in the system through home ownership, they perform for the system. Back in 1991, George Bush and Jack Kemp asked me to be a part of an oversight committee that would transfer public property to private property. Turn these apartment complexes, turn them over to the tenants, and make them private owners. You know what I found? Those people that lived in those apartment complexes in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they were 10 times tougher on drug dealers than the cops ever thought about being. You know why? Because it was theirs. This is mine. I've got a stake in the system. Home ownership. Friends, we've got to invest. We've got to encourage investment in poor communities. Through the American Community Renewal Act, we encourage investment in poor communities. We encourage people to spend dollars by tweaking the tax code and creating venture capital. And speaking of venture capital gains, we just had a capital gains tax cut in this last budget agreement that we signed around the 1st of August. And in 1992, I remember in 1992, when I was out there fighting for the Bush Quail team, I'd go to some forum as a surrogate speaker for the Bush Quail team, and we'd get around to talking about capital gains. And every time we got around the capital gains, it never failed. The other team would say, Watts is just fighting for a concession for George Bush and his wealthy friends. Friends, let me tell you something. Did you realize in 1996, 50% of the people that paid capital gains, 75% of the people that paid capital gains made $50,000 or less? 88% of the people that paid capital gains made $75,000 or less. Now, $75,000 is a lot of money, friends. I don't mean to make light of that. But let me tell you this. If you are a family with 2 kids making $75,000 a year, once you get through paying taxes, once you get through paying your utilities, once you get through paying your car payment, your house payment, your car insurance, your utilities, your groceries, once you get through doing all the things that you must do, I guarantee you, you're living from paycheck to paycheck. $75,000. So when you talk about capital gains, cutting capital gains creates venture capital to go into these poor communities, to invest in small business. And I am big on small business. Over 90% of the businesses in the 4th District of Oklahoma employ 6 people or less. 6 people or less. Nobody can ever say that J.C. Watts is fighting for the big businesses in his community. Over 90% of the businesses in my district employ 6 people or less. Prior to me coming to Congress, I was one of those small business people. I employed 5 people. Friends, we've got to separate the fact from the fiction. We've got to give. I am willing to say to all of America, North Carolina and Oklahoma and Texas and New York City and California, I am willing to say to all of America that I want to cater to your intelligence, not your fears. And I trust that you'll make the right decision. And if they say to me, J.C. Watts, you're wrong, you've missed it. Man, what you're talking about is crazy. If the people in the 4th District of Oklahoma say, your ideas are nutty, they're radical, they make no sense, we don't want you as our congressman anymore. Friends, trust me, I don't need this job. I had a job before I came to Congress, and God will give me a job when I leave. And I take a whole lot more pride in being called daddy than I do in being called congressman. And friends, let me tell you something. And when the people in the 4th District of Oklahoma, when they send me home, if they send me home, I will say you have honored me by allowing me to represent you for the last 4 years. You have allowed me to see things and do things that the 5th child of Buddy and Helen Watts never in his wildest dreams thought he'd ever be able to do. Friends, we are in a battle for the spiritual and the economic soul of the most wonderful nation known to man. We're in a battle. We're in a battle. And friends, we cannot say in this battle as we go into the 21st century, we cannot say that it's just the economy, that character doesn't matter. What are we saying to our kids? What are we saying to our kids? We are saying to our children that anything goes. We're saying to our children the only thing right is to get by and the only thing wrong is to get caught. What are we saying to our kids? What kind of society do we live in when Tiger Woods, this young golfing sensation that's taken the world, the golfing world by storm, what kind of society do we live in when Tiger Woods would be criticized and be considered a child of privilege? You know why? Because his father spent time with him in growing up. Friends, what are we coming to in America? Hey, guys, let me tell you something. Dads and granddads, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. I thought we were supposed to spend time with the kids. And you know, I've got an 8-year-old daughter. She was 7 during the last basketball season. I'd go to her basketball games. And let me tell you, dads and granddads, God's going to have a special place in heaven for those dads and those granddads that'll go to their 7-year-old daughter or granddaughter's basketball game and sit for an hour and the score is 4-3 at the end. Special place in heaven. I'm saying it toward them. I'm saying, just shoot. Just kick the ball if you have to. Just shoot. But you know, I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to do that. Hey, soccer moms, we're supposed to go watch your kids play soccer. Dads, we need soccer dads as well. And let me tell you something. There's nothing more proud. There's nothing more special for your child to be playing Little League soccer or Little League baseball or Little League basketball than to look up in those stands and to see Dad or to see Mom or to see Mom and Dad. Friends, we've got a tremendous challenge as we go into the 21st century, as we start the new millennium. Friends, there is a role for government in the most wonderful nation known to man. But I personally believe, as I have fought the battles that I know that small business people battle, I am a firm believer that we cannot create prosperity. We cannot litigate, tax, and regulate people into prosperity. We can't do it. It won't work. Government by the people, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Friends, that's important. And it's important that each and every one of you, that you get involved on a daily basis, trying to make a difference in your community. Karen's done it in her life. Karen's done it in her community. And Karen, I got to tell you, I commend you. I commend you for doing what you've done in your life. And I'm not going to, embarrass her. I know she doesn't like for people to talk about it. She just did it. She didn't think there was anything special about it. She didn't do it for glory, and she didn't do it for accolades to be written up in the paper. She just did it. And that's the thing about my papa's generation. They just did it. They just did it. Daddy, when he used to bring food home and bring groceries home, you talk about budgeting. Friends, it's amazing what we could get by with if we tighten our belts and we could get by with things that we think we need, and we really don't need them, we just want them. And my father, to this day, I don't eat ginger snap cookies. Because when my father would go get groceries, he'd bring back those old nasty ginger snaps. And you know why he brought back ginger snaps? Because you got the most for the least. He knew how to spend his dollars. I don't eat Post Toasties. I don't eat cornflakes. I never heard of Frosted Flakes or Cookie Crisp when I was a kid. You got cornflakes, and if you ate it or you didn't eat it. You remember during the winter months, I used to hate for winter to come because you got those, Mom went out and bought those coats that was 3 sizes too big so you could wear them about 7 years. I wore the same coat when I was 12 that I wore when I was 7. That's the way they did it. That generation just did it like that. My father's generation, they were the generation that just did it. If you were called to go to war, you just did it. You didn't even ask it. You just did it. If you ever get an opportunity, watch the movie Tuskegee Airmen. Those men just did it. They just went and fought for the country proudly. No questions. They just did it. My father just went out and you honored the family name. You went out and you brought home a living. You just did it. I saw my father work 3 jobs. The whole time I lived under his roof, he worked 3 jobs, trying to take care of his wife and kids. You know, I'm sure there's many days he didn't want to get up, go to work. But he did it. He just did it. And he taught every one of his children. He taught every one of us. If you work hard, if you understand sacrifice, commitment, if you go to school and get an education, get a good education. Now here was a 6th grade educated man saying to his kids, go get an education. You know why he said that? The reason he said that is he understood very well what Frederick Douglass meant when he said, some people know the importance of education because they have it. He said, I know the importance of education because I don't have it. He said, so you will go to school. And not only will you go to school, you will act civilized when you get there. You will respect adults. It was out of bounds for any kid in the Watts household to disrespect adults, even if it was the town drunk. You didn't do it. You didn't do it. Understand hard work, sacrifice, commitment, education. Faith was important. And last but not least, he stressed personal responsibility, which simply means, as Daddy would always say, if you buy your bed, you sleep in it. If you make the choice, Junior, it is your choice. Good or bad, it is your choice. You be man enough to live up to it. And friends, it's interesting. It's interesting once you become an adult and you say, those values and principles that my mother and father taught me and that my grandmother stressed to me and that my football coach and my basketball coach and some person in the community that I respected, that they saw enough in me that they believed that if I do these things, live these values, live these principles, exercise these values, exercise these principles. It's interesting when you become an adult, and especially when you get into politics and you try to implement these things in the policy, people think you're strange. They think you've forgotten where you've come from. No, I remember where I came from. That's why I fight for those things. I believed Buddy Watts and Helen Watts when they said to me, if you understand sacrifice, you understand commitment, you understand hard work, personal responsibility, faith, get an education. I believed them when they said to me that you could make your way in a sometimes cruel world if you'll exercise and live and have a conviction about those values and those principles. Friends, government has a role to play as we go into the 21st century. But I believe that government should encourage, we should use the bully pulpit to encourage churches to do what they do best. It is not the role of the government to save the soul of the American people. That is the church's responsibility. We should encourage parents to do what they do best, and that's to be parents. Government doesn't make good parents. We should encourage the private sector to do what they do best in creating jobs. Friends, if we create a foundation of jobs and economic development by growing government, we are building a house on sand. A strong economy must be built through private enterprise, jobs through private enterprise. So government must encourage the churches and private enterprise and all these other entities out there, families, communities, to do what they do best. And government should do what it does best. Some of the bureaucracy that I deal with on the National Security Committee, I hate it. But I tell you what, the end result is, friends, we do a pretty doggone good job in fighting wars when we let the experts fight the wars, i.e. 1991. We do a pretty good job, for the most part, in creating infrastructure. I serve on the Transportation Committee. Government does a pretty good job in some areas. But government can't be experts in everything. When you look at getting people out of drugs, getting kids out of gangs, when you look at getting people from welfare to workfare, let me tell you something. You've got the private sector, and many of them faith-based entities, that they get a 7 to 8 to 1. They do a 7 to 8 to 1 better job than the government. But we say, no, JC, can't use them. Why can't we? They're getting kids out of gangs. They're getting people off drugs. Man, so what? They hang a cross in the foyer. They do a pretty good job. Results is what we want. Friends, we've got a challenge before every one of us. And you must be involved. You must be involved on a daily basis. And if you're not involved on a daily basis, making sure that the truth is being told, ignorance wins, decay wins, drugs win, when the person that you see in the mirror on a daily basis is not involved in saving and sustaining the greatest nation known to man. Friends, I talk about government in all of my presentations. But I don't talk about government because I hate government. I love government. I just love my freedoms a whole lot more. And I believe as we go into the 21st century, we must understand we've got a wonderful nation. I talked to the West Charlotte High School today, and I said to those young men and young women, we've got a great America. In spite of all of our faults and failures, in spite of all of our shortcomings, we must understand we've got a great America. And if you'll go out and pay the price, understand sacrifice, commitment, the importance of education, the importance of working hard, the importance of personal responsibility, the importance of faith. If you'll do those things, you'll make your way in a sometimes brutal and cruel society. There's plenty of room for you if you'll do those things. Thomas Jefferson said, "My God, how little do my countrymen know what precious blessings they are in possession of, and which no other people on earth enjoy." America is a great nation that is sending a clarion call for strong but humble leadership, so that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth, and this nation under God shall experience a new birth of freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Watts, for your inspiring remarks. Because you retired before you had a chance to play for our Carolina Panthers, we'd like to give you this special All-Carolina souvenir as a reminder of your visit. We look forward to your return. Again, our thanks to you and our thanks to all of you for your support of the lecture series and the work of the Jesse Helms Center. Good night, and we'll see you in the spring.